Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11, and of course we're playing, yes, as Japan. Now, Brady Lawson, a long-time viewer here, asked me a question: was there a way to see manpower losses for the sites? And yes, there is. Now, I did look when he, after he asked, and I said I would show it in the next episode I would make, which is this one. But to me, this is entirely uninteresting. I mean, not that it has no value, but it's just something that I'm just not used to doing. So it's not that it's wrong or bad or I don't like it. No, nothing like that. It's just, I just don't have much of an interest in it, so I don't do this naturally. This is why I just haven't showed it. It's not that it's a problem. But you can come here to the strategic overview, and we can look at naval actions. We can hit look at a particular nation. So we see some convoys raided, but these are ours. These are theirs. We can look at some of the others, or we can hit the all button, or the none, go back to blank. Then air here, we can hit the all again, so we can see that we have lost a little bit of damage in our provinces from enemy bombers. We've done some damage to enemy bombers. Okay, and land, which is what we have here. Again, this is all. We could just go to none and look, China. And so if we go to all, we can see we've lost 68 manpower total. They've lost 9,373 manpower. However, we want to translate these into actual human losses, I don't know, but that should give you oh, this last year. Okay, well, yes, let's see, I'm not even used to looking at this. That was last month. The entire conflict here. So the entire conflict with all this, I guess, is starting in 36, so we are just looking at the last little bit of it here. We've lost 1,024. They've lost, let's see, 131,724. Yeah, still a lot bigger for that, for the entire conflict. We can look at over the year, and so we can go back to entire conflict here for the air, and entire conflict for the ships. It'd just be here. So very little minor, even for the manpower here in comparison to scale. A little bit of IC losses, I guess. Don't know exactly what that means, but I don't know if that's a province they've retaken briefly from guerrilla action or something. Not sure. But yeah, that's... Oh, this is IC in production, I do believe. Not ICs on the map. Like I say, I don't normally even look at this. I know it exists. Known it exists for a long time. Not going to say like forever, but for a long time I've known that, yeah, we can do a sort of a strategic thing. But that, I don't know, the metrics don't interest me that much, I guess. I look at it more as in lost units, battles, actual sort of territory, which, of course, we find a bit more on the map. Who's controlling what provinces, that kind of thing. Well, they're getting support very soon. Good. Okay, well, That should help. These guys can move to here, and I think I was going to support that attack, but I think it would be better to... Where are there any more victory point hexes? Here. Okay, I guess it would just still be good to move into there. They're in the best shape, so they're going to support that. I actually have them join the attack. Because once they're there, they can push into other provinces. Or back to here. Okay, naval HQs have advanced. Very nice. So we're increasing our overhead for our Navy's light infantry branch. I think that will also be, yes, grayed out. And infantry support tanks have advanced. Very good. And I moved even more leadership over to officers because I hadn't seen this 106% change, though we haven't been playing very many days. I've been talking a lot per episode, but I figured I want to push. So we've got more than enough supplies. So, I want to have a slight excess. I don't want to quite just... You can, of course, just sort of, you know, feed off your supply stocks. That does work, but you need to watch that so it doesn't go, you know, I wouldn't purely feed off my supply stocks for down to less than half max. Just wouldn't do that. I wouldn't suggest doing it. Now, of course, once you're in a real pickle, you know, can't produce much, that's a different question. And still wanting to produce new stuff because you have manpower. And if you have the supplies, then it does make sense. Okay. Okay, so we're getting some more... Okay, I think we'll do 3 more fighters and 2 more naval bombers. I know that's more than what's going to be needed, but that's sort of my idea. What I want to do. No. Okay, these guys back here, they don't need to stay there. No point in holding that province particularly. Sure, it does keep partisans from popping up there, but I don't think that'll be an immediate question. Yeah, we are losing. Okay. You go this way. We'll come back to occupying that in a moment. We get the money for oil. Okay. I know it is Britain and it is far away and they're likely to be enemies at some point, but it is a non-US source, and I don't know that if US embargoes start happening, whether they're going to be, the British are going to jump in on that or not. I don't know that they will. Okay, another division here. We have one more of these. Sort of cool headquarters. Don't know that they're like any better than regular headquarters, but cool symbol. So for immersion's sake, these are all going to go under the 22nd. And no, not you. You're good for an armored division because we don't have many armored commanders, but here we go. Now you can get on. Oh no, not those boats. Not those boats. Do we have? Yes, we have other boats. These boats. Yeah, I know they're ships. They can get on too. We need more headquarters down south. Trying to click through. There we go. Get on board them. Come down to Canton, or however we want to sort of say that. Yes. We will use our infantry support tanks for our next advance, and the elite Marine Corps division there will support them. And I guess these guys will support too. This is also a victory point province, so we're going to attack here as well. But I want to keep this as an important attack because there's their current capital, Chungking. Okay, direct fire unit combined arms has advanced, and we're going to stop that to get back to more fully, or not overly done. I do like the idea that everything that I've requested to be researched on is actually being researched on, and not just, we'll get to it someday, sir, when we get more people. No, I want to feel that it's being done. And obviously the one on the bottom is, you know, may only be a partial. That's sort of what we've been waiting for. It wasn't going to be much of a pocket, I know. Okay, guys. Yes, we're getting ready. We've shut. Well, this is, I guess, technically their last. Well, are here, but can't do supply lines across Allied territory. Okay, they get to march back up to there. Okay, the Monroe effect, yes. Don't know, Charles James something Monroe. Found out about the shape charge type effect. Okay, so that will help. major victory. Where was it? Is Yingping here? Okay. Yep. About gutted an armored division. And these guys can put that fight into there. Okay, something's flying over. I'm sure you're hearing it. Okay, now that's stopped. Yeah, you guys see about overrunning those retreating troops. Okay, another major victory, excellent. Yeah. And we've won here, okay. They look like they're going to be successful, so these guys can start in on their militia versus conscripts. Not sure who the winner is going to be with that. Probably the defenders. These guys are taking on, well, mostly HQs, but some garrison troops. They're just about gutted, so these guys will would have come and hit here. That we are trying to do some decent level of. Okay, we are now a veteran army, so we got organization regain rate plus 15%, land organization regain rate plus 10%, officer recruitment plus 20%, and casualty trickle back. Okay, now okay, this is going to be a wargaming topic, not a historical topic. So first, let me examine all of these things. Veteran army. Okay, organization regain rate. That seems, I'm not talking so much about the percentage here, but the concept here. That seems to be a thing. If you have been in a lot of combat compared to being a well-trained, but, you know, entirely peacetime, no one's been at war, shall we say, for a long time. Maybe highly trained, but the, effects of combat can disrupt you, and you get reorganized takes longer. Okay. Land organization, okay, you're just better organized, you're more experienced. Officer recruitment. I'm guessing that this is maybe more that, not that we're getting more officers, though that may be sort of what they're thinking, but I can also see that, hey, officers that are veterans do better than officers that are green, so they're in effect as if having more officers, so it sort of puts that in casualty trickle back. Don't know how veteran army really affects that. Now, say all this, and this is obviously a BI black ice thing. talking to Django earlier today about Hearts of Iron 4 Black Ice. So, well, I think, what is it, Maverick or somebody is still involved, maybe. But, and it was over over similar effects, if not some of the exact same ones, for the Soviet Union to sort of counteract German invasions, defend the motherland, or whatever the effect was called. And it was giving a bunch of 50% effects to some of these, like land organization. Now, and I very much objected to that because I believe the primary goal of that is for play balance. And I am all good for good balancing out of, say, especially in Hearts of Iron 4, where you have specific equipment like a fighter or a Tiger, or a P-51 Mustang or something like that, is you don't want to make it too uber or too weak. You want to try to balance it. The Tiger has similar effects for killing other tanks as relative to the T-34 or the KV-85 or something. And how good is it at killing infantry, the soft attack? You sort of want to try to balance that out to meet the historical balance. So you draw a baseline. This is what a Sherman. They didn't change a whole lot. They're definitely. I'm talking the basic models, not the upgunned jumbos or the long-barreled high velocity 76 models. I'm just talking about your standard, which they continue to use up until the end of the war, the standard Sherman models. The armor, they put a little bit of applique armor on it, but effectively didn't increase. It was just basically the same tank from when introduction to the end of the war. Because when it was introduced, it was not necessarily, no, it was better than the T-34, that's for sure, because the T-34, when it was introduced, was still a two-man turret tank. We always think of the T-34-85, which is the three-man turret. The other models, the earliest ones, are really small turrets and hard to operate in. The sort of mid, and it's not even that really, it's more of a certain factory changes. So some factories are still producing one model of the T-34. This is what I understand, and I could have the details wrong, but another model builds still the T-34 with a 76 millimeter gun on it, but it's a bigger turret, a little more roomy. I still think it's a two-man turret, but it's a little better kind of thing than the early small low profile. Yes, it's good that it's low profile, but it's really cramped and hard to move in, and again, it's only two man. So compared to all of that, the Sherman is better than that. The Sherman doesn't necessarily have a better gun. I don't know right offhand, because I'm not really used to comparing those two to each other. And probably the sloped armor on a T-34's hull, at least, is better than the Sherman's, maybe, but all around as a tank, because that's crew comfort. How long can the crew operate before it's really, facing so much fatigue? Because, okay, after 48 or longer hours of driving that tank and fighting in that battle and staying awake, you can keep awake and you can keep fighting because people are shooting at you, and so your body's doing adrenaline, but you're starting to make mistakes. You're not aiming as well. You're not driving as well. It's crew fatigue. So you may still be up and going, but the guy who's been up for 48 hours in a Sherman is probably going to be doing better than if you've been 48 hours driving, or just, you may be parking a lot or getting refueled, or I don't know what, but in a T-34, you're going to be doing better. And a better crew is probably going to mean victory or loss more than how thick your armor is or something like that, in small details. Now, it matters when it's a Panzer I thickness of, an early model versus a Sherman thickness. And if your gun is only a machine gun versus a proper tank gun, it does matter. But when it's sort of close, it's probably crew effectiveness is going to matter the most. So we can look at the Sherman. So you draw sort of a baseline of a Sherman and go, oh yeah, okay, well, its sort of armor is this. Okay, well, an early Panzer IV has thinner armor. Okay, so that would have less of an armor value. And, but that's more than a Panzer II armor's value. And because since you're not making specific side armor for Hearts of Iron 4, you're not making side armor, front armor like you would be for War Thunder. You can check out some of my War Thunder videos. In that where the round hits, how thick is that specific armor? And I played, war games that are, tank warfare, and it's the individual tank and where the armor thickness is to where the shell hits. That's important. You can't do that on this level, but you can try to do the effectiveness. So you draw a baseline of something, and then you go up and down in relative to it. That kind of player balance is I'm really cool with, and they have their whole, with Black Ice, their whole tech tree patterns of different tank types, through all the German Panzers and all of the stuff. Maybe not every single little detail of the changes of them, but they've got most of them there. And okay, so you try to balance it out in relative to other tank models. So I'm all good with that for balance issues. Then you sort of, and we've talked about recently, earlier today, at the start of this, and in a very recent episode, one that I made yesterday, but I don't know if it was 1 or 2 episodes ago, talked about what does this manpower mean, in translation into real humans fighting. Is that, obviously that's not 971 men, but is this number based upon how many men are in divisions, or how many men are in armies? Meaning all of these guys, at all of these levels, and guys not maybe so much in specific headquarters stuff, but in supply depots. And, you can imagine what we're talking about is, the soldiers not in training, but those training soldiers, the training command, and just your reserves at home that you're not sending off, because notice we've stripped Japan. So what does, this number, okay, is player balanced off because people strip stuff from home and put all the men into frontline units. This number needs to be a relative number versus Chinese numbers versus American numbers versus German numbers, and so on. So there is sort of that sort of, how are you figuring army size? And then, if you look at, well, America had X millions of men in the armed forces. Okay, and how many did they have in the Army? How many if you're breaking it out into the Army Air Force, and how many into the Navy, and the U.S. Coast Guard? How many are in the U.S. Coast Guard? U.S. Coast Guard's important. Why? Well, they guarded the American coast, so had Germany or Japan started to do a man in the high castle, starting, to invade America, they would have been fighting. And there were lots and lots of U.S. Coast Guard troops. Personnel in boats. Oh, and the U.S. Coast Guard was also responsible for some operations on some of these landings. There were U.S. Coast Guard personnel at least on some of the later landings into like Iwo Jima, that were operating some of the landing craft and other near coastal type vessels. So the Coast Guard did get frontline service in some of the, howling worse campaigns. Now, of course, they were the landing craft operators, and I don't know their casualty rates versus the guys, storming Mount Suribachi, because the Japanese at some of the later stages were sort of letting the Americans land and then coming into well-prepared traps. But they were there in some places as much as any other Navy, onboard ships that could be attacked by kamikazes, so they were there too. So how big was the U.S. Coast Guard? Has that even been taken into effect when we figure out population size versus military size versus how much of the population needs to do critical but civil support, shall we say, like food? We don't really model food really in this game, but you get the idea of, how many are doing necessary functions to keep a nation functioning but aren't specifically creating war materials. How big of that population size versus how much population is making those, making Sherman tanks. How big is that? So you have all this, you can look up various statistics, however good we have them for the period, for, population, males between the ages of X and Y and females between, and then because we do still have the domestic element of taking care of kids and other things, so not all women can go in and do even because it doesn't have to be coal mine. 60-year-old grandmothers don't need to go become coal miners. They could be seamstresses sewing parachutes or something, or sewing uniforms. They could be doing a critical war work that isn't physically taxing. It might be fairly longish hours, but isn't physically taxing. So you can get 60-year-old women doing something that is critical in the war effort, but maybe they're better off at home taking care of the kids of the 30-year-old woman who is at the armaments factory. So you sort of have to kind of balance out various things. And I totally get that. That kind of balance that mods do, or the base game does, I am completely in favor of. Okay. Now, beyond that, there's another type, which I do for my events. Maybe this is a prejudice because it's events and I do those, is event-based things here. And it's like some of the things you start the Barbarossa campaign and immediately the Soviet Union gets a massive organization hit and organization regain hits and all that. Well, that represents the historical unpreparedness we believe the Soviets had. Okay? So that is an appropriate effect that can be placed onto the game to simulate something that is a temporary, historically based thing. We may be wrong about it, either wrong in the percentage, and I'm sure we're wrong in the percentage, because somebody's Veterans Army is going to be a 10% bonus for an equal number of battles, and another person's army is going to be a 16.5% bonus, historically. We know the numbers are wrong. We're trying to make educated guesses. And I say we because I have talked to, in the past, when he was active, doing it, Panzeroo on this and others, and other, modders, including Revolver Held. So we have talked about some of this stuff, and just in general concepts. So I know we are wrong, but we are making educated and sometimes very educated guesses. So I would rather take mine and some of, because I've talked to, like Revolver Held, he knows his history, and like I say, I am sure, and he knows he's wrong in some of these things, but I don't think he's very wrong. And I pointed out in the last German series where and when I think he over or underestimated things, because I am also very educated on the topic, but we're not going to be right. So that kind of stuff I am for. And it could also be, as you see a lot of, my events for Germany, most of those, because I was very early on advised by a few people that they really loved my events, but they didn't like a pure eye candy, just a pure, oh, look at this cute girl, she finds a puppy, isn't this cute? Or some sort of cute story from World War II, or an important or a tragic story from World War II. They really liked the idea that it had a game effect, even if extremely minor. So I've attached an effect to most of my events, often things like these, sometimes just for 5 days, 2% improvement of organization regain rate, because some general gets promoted, or a hit to organization regain rate for 5 days of 2% because some general dies, and all the army's sad and isn't, regaining organization as well. So it has an effect, because these do have effects in real life. Again, I'm wrong at the levels, but it's also really, really marginal. Okay, so that is, so I like historically based effects. You could come up with, what do you think would have been the effects on Britain had they been fighting on their own territory once the Germans had landed, or something like that? Whether you think they would be falling apart, or whether you think they'd be digging in and fighting harder, so that kind of thing. Now, this may seem like a long way to get there, and hope somewhat interesting to you understand the mind of modders and game, because modders are game developers. We're just modding somebody else's already developed game. So this, I'm sure, affects or is in the thoughts of. I'm just saying, I'm sure, just that I'm projecting. I haven't talked to them, so it's not like inside information. But with the devs of Hearts of Iron or other games, has a similar sorts of thing. Now, what I'm objecting to is a lot of those modifiers for dealing with the invasion of the Soviet Union are 50% bonuses, like to land organization and other things. And I believe it is just to make the game more challenging, not to make it more historical. Or, they say to make it more historical because every time Germany invades the Soviet Union with a human player and you have a historical order of battle of the, Soviets and the Germans immediately, within one season, every single time take Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad. And so every time we set it up with the historical matchups, Germany always wins. Super fast. Well, then we need to examine why that is. And I would contend a large reason in Hearts of Iron 3 and Hearts of Iron 4 is that the AI sucks. That's why I would largely say it happens. And so they want to pad the ASI, or the AI, the AI with super uber powers to keep it from keep it from losing so badly. I object to this. Now, the other thing is that happens that I am for is this. This is important. This is very important. Here, what level are your light armor? What level is your medium armor? Are we going to be fighting? So let's just say that, if I'm going to fight with Japanese medium armor, it's going to be at 38 levels when the Americans are showing up with, 1944 levels. And my armor is going to suck because of that. If we were doing historical. Or if I've boosted all of my naval and air power stuff, but these guys are stuck back in 39 and they're doing 1944 techs. And they've also got a lot more radio communication. And they've got a lot more land or, organization, command structure improvements. That is where I would have the telling differences. And this is why I love a lot of what they did or tried to do with Black Ice. Is have a lot of techs. Also throw on, of course, a lot more leadership or slots, because these are in essence slots over here. So the slots initially sort of bothered me with Hearts of Iron 4, but they're really these. These are slots. It's just that you could move the slots over to espionage, diplomacy, or officers, and I can totally see breaking it away from all of those and having those as different things and non-competitive things. So it comes down to, in essence, slots. I like, and I don't pay much attention to these just because I guess I sort of kind of feel I don't have a lot of, how do I improve chemical engineering? There isn't like improve chemical engineering, click here. Which, of course, could be a thing that I could do with events or something. I really haven't. I think you can modify these with events, in which you could do, improve schools, chemical engineering schools, pay, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 supplies or whatever it is. And, and when you do it with an event, unless they're going to like cheat and, respawn that event, it can happen only once. So it's not like, insert 1,000 supplies, get bonus, and just keep inserting supplies. You get it to do it like once or twice. I focus on historical developments, like, I have made a bunch for my unreleased, and I need to get back to working on it. Hearts of Iron 4 version, I was helped with a bunch of stuff for chemistry-based stuff for events for Germany. And so I look to historical events and developments that would give different bonuses, But I sort of like these. These are basically not in Hearts of Iron 4. I don't understand that there is anything like this, really, that makes certain research going faster. Because you can see here these sort of sub things here. Improve how fast you research these texts, and once you research bonuses, it gives more to that. And where are the sort of hierarchical charts? I don't think I see that here. These could be something that's entirely never been put in. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this is going into Grand Battle Plan Doctrine here. Helps some of this stuff. And Human Wave Doctrine. So, you have more Grand Battle Doctrine here. The more you do this, the easier it is to research these. It's sort of, and here, if you have more of these, it makes you help you research this faster. And so I love this concept. I, again, don't normally dig into it as much as maybe I should for events. And I also don't pay much attention to it because I'm sort of strategizing, this other way. So say to, I would make particular limitations for certain nations based on some of these things. Like commerce defense. I would probably ban Japan from doing this if you want to play a historical game. Now, how much do we want to force Japan? And if I am as a player, do I want to make the same mistakes as Germany? And I sort of don't want to do that. I'm sitting here thinking about this as I'm talking about this, because I'm planning on pretty soon moving over and doing this, so that we can get some commerce defense, because Japan should have done that. They did it very, very, very poorly. Or unrestricted submarine warfare, which of course both the U.S. and U.S. and Germany excelled at. Germany in the Atlantic, U.S. in the Pacific. Britain did some of this, mostly in the Mediterranean, against the Italians, or Italians or Germans, or whatever you want to call it. But Japan really wanted to focus its submarines on screening elements for its fleets. And, don't waste, and this I've learned earlier on, I saw, if you're going to sink merchant ships, come up and shell them, and then, save the torpedoes for the warships. And at first I was going, yeah, that's stupid. That's just stupid. You're being stupid. Just the merchant vessels are what's really important to sink, and that's right. But then after I'm reading Japanese Destroyer Captain, that's the name of the book, Captain Hara book, they were given all kinds of admonitions to not use up expendables like ammunition all the time, starting before the war in the Pacific starts. Don't use up too much of your shells. Don't use up too much of your torpedoes. They had a massive munitions supply problem. So I understand some of the directions that they were given more now, in that it was based at least partially on the idea that we don't have enough of this stuff to fight the war. And this is at the starting or before the starting of the war, and they're choosing to start the war. That's sort of the, not criminal as in the, war crimes criminal situation, but criminal government as in that they're not that they're just not prepared, they're incapable of fighting the war, and they decide to start the war as a governing element. I mean, if you're incapable of fighting and winning the war, and you don't have a clear path to victory, which they did not. They had a clear path that they saw, we're going to have some victories, and then they'll sue for peace, and we'll give up some of our gains, and we'll negotiate a settlement. That is not a clear path for victory. That is a prayer. a hope, an expectation that is not anywhere near a path for victory. Germany had a path for victory. It was going to crush Poland. It did that. It had a clear path for victory for the Soviet Union. It was going to crush the Soviet Union. They expected less resistance. Hitler particularly expected the idea that they were going to kick in the door and the house of cards was going to fall down, but their path to victory was to go in to conquer them. There was no thought in the Japanese head how they were going to put troops into Washington, D.C. or troops into Los Angeles. None of that was in their mindset. They had no idea of a plan to be victorious over America, just that they could have some tactical advantages and then get a peace settlement out of it. That is not a plan for victory. They had no plan for victory against Britain, other than hopefully maybe Germany would do it for us, maybe hopefully, which Germany hadn't been demonstrating that it was going to have any sort of victories, especially in late 1941. You have the Germans slowing up, though I don't know how. The Japanese are communicating, the ambassador is communicating. As we now know, the Japanese ambassador staff was communicating lots of German communiques and situational reports because he was being given those to the Japanese government, and I believe it was primarily the U.S. government was reading all of that traffic, being sent over. So they were understanding Germany's perspective, particularly on the Eastern Front, or other things. This is how they warned the Soviets about Operation Citadel, because they told the Japanese about it, and the Japanese told themselves about it, across to Japan, and we listened, and then we warned Stalin and crew. So they may have still thought Russia was going to be defeated, but there was, the Battle of El Alamein wasn't, looking so bright. Wasn't, they weren't, yeah, okay, but because, this is before the Americans are, well, actually, no, El Alamein is a bit later. Okay, that's more 42. Yeah, but the British are still holding out in Egypt. And there is no real sense, maybe they're getting a false German sense of, I'm trying to analyze this now, of how effective Germany's being in cutting off supplies to Britain, but there is no sense of any time soon of Germany invading Britain itself. So there is no real plan for Japan to defeat even Britain, or even defeat Australia. There's no real plan for, putting troops down into the capitals, major cities, Sydney and Melbourne of Australia. There's no real sense of that, no real plans for that. Not that, if we keep fighting long enough, we'll eventually get there. No, there's no real organized plans for doing that. So Japan goes to war in a criminally irresponsible manner without a plans for victory, a war that they choose to go to. Yes, we can, and I've talked about why they felt they were forced to, but it was still a choice. Their other choice was, of course, to try to withdraw from China partially and try to make a settlement with Chiang Kai-shek. They had previously, at least I think right around 38, right around maybe a little earlier than now in 38, they had sent emissaries to talk to Chiang Kai-shek to start a peace talks, because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted, as I said before, get a big bite of China and be victorious, fairly victorious, and then settle for peace talks and withdraw from some of their conquests, while maintaining, let's say, 60% of their conquests or something like that. I don't know if they had a specific formula, or we want to hold these cities but we're willing to give up other things. I don't know. But they were definitely willing and wanting a peace settlement so that they could digest come in and occupy and organize up their big bite of China. Now, okay, so that's on the criminal actions of Japan. So their unrestricted submarine warfare was not, they wanted submarine warfare against military vessels, not against commerce. That's where we are. So unrestricted submarine warfare, which is a commerce rating strategy, as it says, rating penalties go down. I would make, and as I'm sitting here thinking about it, not that Japan or the Japanese player can't do it, but they would have on both of these big penalties to researching them. Specifically national modifiers of some sort, so that yes, you can go, oh yeah, we're not going to make the same mistake that Japan did, because I'm planning on not making that mistake. But the national character, or the institutional character of the Navy in this case, and they're both affecting it. It's both the institution of the Navy, which is we've talked about this before, the very Nihonian Navy, wanting to have that decisive battle. They're thinking originally battleships, shifting more to the big decisive battle of aircraft carriers, defeating the main enemy fleet, and then once you do that, all other things will follow from that. Once the main enemy fleet is done, well then, yeah, you can parse out your destroyers to escort your submarine or your convoys, and yeah, you can have your submarines go after their convoys, but they're going to pretty soon see sense and realize that they got to go for peace because their fleet has been sunk. We win the war when the fleet's sunk. That's part of the institution. The national viewpoint, ethnic, cultural viewpoint, is of an aggressive war against warriors. That's how the Japanese want to fight. They don't want to fight merchantmen. They want to, they gain honor, they gain recognition by sinking an enemy warship, not by sinking a merchant vessel. So it's also coming from their national character. It's like a fighter pilot, 2 enemy aircraft. They get to surprise one. And let's just say, probably the likelihood is the other one gets to escape. Let's just say that. Let's just say that the pilot has in his mind that there are 2 enemy aircraft in front of him. He's coming out of the sun and they don't see him, so he gets to attack one and know he gets to kills it, but probably in the attack the other one's going to get away. Let's just take that as a premise. And he has them both there. One is a fighter, and one is a transport plane. And he knows it carries no specific general to shoot down. He knows it's not. It's maybe carrying supplies to, drop out to keep a garrison cut off alive, or it's paratroopers, or something like that. It's a big supply plane, or the fighter. Which one do I get to kill? They're going to go after the fighter, when probably the more important thing is to go after the transport plane, because that's a whole bunch of soldiers crashing and burning, not just one fighter plane. The transport is the right answer. The wrong answer is the fighter. This is not that, oh, there's a fighter coming at me and I've got to fight him before I get to the transport plane. Then, of course, you don't want to die as a person. 2, if your aircraft is shot down, it's a loss to your country. So, yes, you're going to fight the attacker and shoot him down, hopefully successfully, and then go after the undefended enemy aircraft. Certainly, that's the right answer there. But this, I was talking about a surprise, get to jump one, for whatever reason, the other one gets away free. Now, maybe in reality, the transport plane is too slow to get away or whatever, so you can get both. But the Japanese pilot would always choose the wrong thing. And here would be another example. You've got a troop ship full of troops chugging along on the ocean, and you have a light cruiser next to it, or a destroyer even, but let's go light cruiser, chugging along next to it, and you have one load of bombs on your airplane, and you get to make one attack because you drop all your bombs, and then you go home. Which do you do? The Japanese are going to go after the cruiser almost always. It can be a light cruiser, fairly light one, not even a bigger Brooklyn type class or Cleveland class light cruiser. It just could be something a little bit bigger than a destroyer class thing. They're going after that, leaving the troop ship there on the surface alive, well, and can land his troops still. Now, of course, he may miss both of them, but he's always going to go after, unless he's ordered, unless he's specifically told. And sometimes the high command does see this, that, oh, we've got to stop the invasion force. You are ordered to strike at the troop transports. But the characteristic of the bombers, pilots, general training and attitude is, I get to sink a cruiser. I will be a hero. I will do good for my emperor by sinking the cruiser. That will then allow our fleet to sink all of their fleet, which doesn't then matter what the transports do, because they're lost without, even if they all land on Island X and take Island X over, without any Navy to protect the supplies, then we'll sink all their supply transports, and that will just become a prison camp de facto for troops on Island X. Well, still better to take out the transport. But they don't see it this way. So that is how I guess, as I'm thinking about this, is make uncharacteristic capabilities for a nation in World War II. Commerce, defense, and unrestricted submarine warfare are uncharacteristic of Japan. They belatedly put some limited effort into commerce defense, very, very little and very poorly, while they still had good destroyers that they were trying to send after our major fleets, but they weren't protecting shipments of steel and coal and whatnot coming to Japan to build replacement ships. Those were getting sunk, so they were making the wrong choice for winning the war, not just an emotional wrong choice, but the wrong choice for or maintaining their war effort. And despite this, so I would give them a handicap here. We know the Soviets basically had no radar. We know the Soviets had very little radios. I'm not entirely sure on this, whether it's just they didn't have the factories or whether they couldn't have the factories. I don't know. You know, whether it's a choice, you know, making vacuum tubes and resistors. I don't know how much production ability they had. The Soviets did have some of that production ability. They were making those things. Again, I don't know that, you know, very few tanks had radio communications in them. Is that a choice, or was it just we're building every single radio that we can? Or is it that they would rather build something other than radios? And maybe they thought it more important to put radios in aircraft. But again, I would make at least some of these things, say, for tanks. And you can see here, at war member is Comintern, at war member is Allies, at war member is Axis, at war, not anything, it's even harder. So even we're at war, we can't do this. But I think that is more to be, well, if you're not in the Axis, the Allies, or the Comintern, you're screwed, and you're somebody like Iran, Persia, whatever you want to call it, or Turkey, and you're sort of screwed. And then now once you get into those camps, because probably if you're one of those and the general war is broken out, you'll be able to jump into one of those three camps, and then you can start researching radios, which represents somewhere between lend-lease of giving you a bunch of radios and technical assistance so that you can make radios. I'm guessing that is a good thought. That is the kind of thing here, whether I put a hard and fast must-have on it or simply a penalty to research it, is how I would do to set national characteristics up. Not too much of this, because how should the Soviets not have much, or should the Soviets, because, and they were very poor at reorganization rates. Because they get organized, they would fight that battle. Often they would fight that unit to a victorious outcome of that battle, or until that unit is functionally destroyed. Not everybody killed, but that unit is now just completely disorganized and has high casualty ratings. It's like, to some degree, what they're looking at is fighting it to something like this. I think this was a defensive battle that they fought and got like this. That is what sort of the end unit, and to a point, because it's more equipment and manpower and a long time regain, if it was that kind of thing, we would just delete this unit and send all its tanks to some other unit and trucks and whatnot that it has left, and its few manpower back into the manpower pool, and we just pop out a fresh unit from training, because training doesn't take nearly as long as production of the equipment, and the equipment comes from the production pool. That's sort of the Soviet style. And then once that offensive or defensive is over, then they start planning new ones. So their organization rate for the Soviet Union is generally low. And we can look at that based on various effects. But I would have that mostly based on various command effects that will be harder for them to study because of the various purges. That I would make these harder to study because of the officer purges in the Soviet Union. So I would tie it into there. And then you go, oh, but that makes Soviet Union so easy to defeat because the Germans can roll over it in 60 days. Well, then you got to figure out the problem, and the problem is most likely, because that's what I believe it is very poor AI. Fix the damn AI. Don't compensate for the bad AI. Leave, and I understand a bit more for Hearts of Iron 3 because they are not coming back to it. I can't imagine, unless I win the lottery and is able to show up to Paradox and go, hey, if you don't want to fix the AI, can I pay you enough money to get this sort of, uncompiled version of it, and I'm going to hire some AI programmers to fix the damn AI, because I will do that if I win a big enough super lottery thing. I'll fly over and talk to Paradox, and if you don't want to, because your production schedule, you don't want to take some of your people to fix this, or your people are incapable of fixing this, I'm going to, pay you enough money, in essence, maybe if I have to buy Hearts of Iron 3 from them, and go and pay for somebody to fix the damn AI. And of course I would also see about doing that for Hearts of Iron 4. But that's how you do this, is fix the AI. Don't, oh, well, the fortifications of Hong Kong were of X, but damn, they keep taking it all the time because the AI won't leave any troops there, so we've got to make Hong Kong look like Gibraltar. And I'm sitting here thinking right now, I do believe Hong Kong had a little bit, the new territories, not Hong Kong, but the new territories, the landward portion, probably did have some defenses. But I'd love for one of you to post a naval gun or something else on the island of Hong Kong pointing out to sea. Singapore had them, I know they did. But did Hong Kong? I don't think so. I could be entirely wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just going, I don't know. Because like I do say, I do know that there was, and with all the chaos and the various Chinese Civil War elements in the 20s and 30s, that they did do some defensive along the landward side. And I don't know, maybe this is just to sort of make it seem like an island a little bit more than some of these defenses, more than a land-based thing here. But neither is this. This is also was an island, but it's so close. It's just you can see across it, so it's boats and landing. So I can sort of kind of see some of this because of that. A special case there. But okay, so this was a game ranting and raving to the end of the episode, and why I don't like what Black Ice is doing in Hearts of Iron 3 or Hearts of Iron 4 to change these effects. To, you know, the AI is stupid and I want to have a challenging game. Find a new game? Leave us the historical stuff because we want a historical game? Okay, and Imperial Highness propaganda fails. 4 has happened to us. Daily Descent. Okay. Again, this is a bit of a hiccup, in my opinion. Not that they didn't have propaganda. There was some level at this time of, this is a long war in China. Okay, now that they're defeated, you start going that way. No, holding down the wrong key. Go that way while you continue down there. You go that way, you cross over to there. But there was some of this idea that this is a long war and it's still going on in Japan. But what we see here is it's sort of intended that you put some of your leadership towards various propaganda elements to stave those off, but because they're spaced out so far and are designed for a 1939 start, it's not allowing us to deal with it as well as we should for Japan. Again, that would be something that maybe you would make Japan super easy to do or something. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, well, please like the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And of course, I love hearing from you, including your thoughts on the topic of balancing versus for game challenge versus trying to simulate historical elements. What would you prefer? A better game to play or a more historical game to play? Thanks so much. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.